He was standing in the snow, barefoot, knocking on the door, while inside, they were laughing. Let that sink in for a second, because when I first saw it, my brain didn't even register it as real. It felt like one of those moments where your eyes see something, but your mind refuses to catch up. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was Christmas morning, the kind that's supposed to feel warm, safe, predictable. So, why was my 6-year-old son standing outside, alone? I'm Elena Carter. I'm 27, and that morning started like any other long shift ending. The kind where your body's exhausted, but your mind is already somewhere else. With him, Noah, 6 years old, quiet, thoughtful. Mine the kind of kid who notices everything, but doesn't always say it out loud. The kind of kid who asks questions like, "Do you think people can feel when someone misses them?" That's my son. And that was the first Christmas I wasn't supposed to wake up with him. I didn't have a choice. I'd picked up an overnight shift at the assisted living center, double pay, holiday rate. The kind of money you don't say no to when rent is tight and bills don't care what day it is. So, the night before, I dropped Noah off at my parents' house. Diane and Mark, my mother and father. On paper, they were the perfect grandparents. Big house, fireplace, decorations everywhere. The kind of place that looks like a Christmas catalog. But something always felt off. Not obvious. Not enough to point to. Just small things. Comments. Tone. On the way my mom would smile, but not with her eyes. When I dropped Noah off that night, he held onto my sleeve just a second longer than usual. "Mom, you'll come get me early, right?" I remember smiling, brushing his hair back. "Of course I will. Before breakfast, if I can." He nodded, trusted me, let go. And I walked out. Now fast forward. It's early morning. My shift ended sooner than expected. A small miracle. And I thought, perfect, I'll surprise him. I'll be there when he wakes up. I'll see his face light up. That was the plan. The neighborhood was quiet when I pulled up. Snow had started falling heavier, soft, thick flakes covering everything in white. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Christmas lights glowed from the windows. Warm yellow, the kind that makes everything feel safe from the outside. And then I saw movement right by the front door. At first, I thought maybe it was a decoration shifting in the wind, or a shadow. But then it moved again, small, slow, and my stomach dropped. It was him, Noah, standing on the porch, barefoot, no coat, no gloves, just thin pajamas that clung to his legs as the snow gathered around his feet. And he was knocking. Not banging, not crying, just knocking, like he didn't want to be too loud. Inside, I could see everything. The living room lights were on, bright, warm. The fireplace was going, flames flickering, stockings hanging. And my parents? They were sitting right there, opening presents, laughing. They hadn't even looked toward the door. Tell me something. What would you do in that moment? Because I didn't think. I didn't pause. I didn't question. I just ran. The snow crunched under my shoes as I rushed forward. I don't even remember dropping my keys, but I heard something hit the ground behind me. All I could see was him, his hands, red, his tiny fingers tapping weakly against the door. When I reached him, I grabbed him instantly, pulled him against me, and the first thing I felt was how cold he was. Not just chilly. Cold in a way that makes your chest tighten. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just clung to me, like he'd been waiting. "I knocked," he whispered. His voice was so small it barely made it past my shoulder. "I knocked." But they didn't hear me. But something about the way he said it didn't sound like he believed that. I looked up at the door, still closed, still locked. And inside, they were still laughing. And that's when something shifted. Because in that moment, I realized something that didn't make sense. Something that shouldn't be possible. Something that made my stomach twist in a way I can't fully explain. This wasn't an accident. And I turned toward the door, ready to find out exactly what had happened. They knew he was out there. That thought didn't come all at once. It crept in, slow, heavy, undeniable, as I stood there holding him, his cold skin pressed against mine. Because here's the thing. That house isn't big enough to miss something like that. Not the front door, not the knocking, not on Christmas morning. I knocked hard, Not like him, soft, careful, polite. No, mine was loud, sharp, demanding. The kind of knock that says something is wrong. Still holding Noah, I shifted him higher against me, like trying to warm him with my body. Hey, I've got you, I whispered, even though my voice didn't feel steady. His arms stayed wrapped around my neck. Tight, too tight. And as I stood there waiting for the door to open, something else started clicking into place. Pieces from the night before. Small things. The kind you ignore in the moment, but replay later. When I dropped him off, my mom had opened the door with that same bright smile she always uses when other people are watching. "Oh, there's my Christmas boy," she said, pulling Noah in like everything was perfect. But then, she looked at me, and the smile shifted. Just slightly. "You didn't pack his heavier coat?" she asked. I remember frowning. "It's in his bag. I told you." She sighed. Not loud, just enough. You always rush things, Elena. At the time, and I brushed it off. Because that's what I've always done. Inside, Noah had already started taking off his shoes, looking around at the decorations. The tree was massive, covered in ornaments that looked too delicate for a 6-year-old to even touch. "Careful," my mom said quickly. "Those are glass." Noah froze, just stood there, hands hovering midair. That was the thing about my mom. She didn't yell much. She didn't have to. My dad, Mark, was in his usual spot. Recliner, half watching TV. "Hey, kiddo," he said, barely glancing over. Noah waved. Quiet. And then came that moment. The one I didn't think mattered until now. Noah tugged on my sleeve again. "Mom, you'll come early?" There it was again. That same question, same tone. "I will," I said, "promise." My mom let out a small laugh. "He'll be fine, Elena. It's one night." But something about the way she said fine didn't sit right. Like it wasn't comfort. More like dismissal. Now back to the present, standing outside, holding him, feeling that cold. The door finally opened, slowly, and there she was, Diane, my mother, standing there like I just interrupted something mildly inconvenient. Her eyes moved from me to Noah and then back to me. No shock, no panic, no urgency. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked. Not what happened, not why is he outside, just, "Why are you here?" I stared at her, waiting, giving her a chance to say something, anything. She was inside, I thought. She saw him. She had to have. "Mom," I said, my voice tighter now. "He was outside." She frowned slightly, like she didn't understand the issue. "Well, yes," she said. He needed a moment." A moment? I looked down at Noah. His feet were red, almost pale in spots, still no shoes, still shaking. "A moment?" I repeated. Behind her I could still see the living room, wrapping paper everywhere, gifts half open, the fire burning bright. And my dad, still sitting there, watching, saying nothing. "You're overreacting," she added, already turning slightly like this conversation was finished. He spilled his drink. I told him to wait outside until he calmed down. Wait outside. In the snow, barefoot. Something inside me tightened. Not exploded, not yet, just locked into place. Because now it wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't uncertainty. It was something else. Something colder than the air outside. I stepped forward, still holding Noah, still staring at her, and that's when the question finally formed. Clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. How long had he been out there? She said it like nothing was wrong. Like this was normal. Like I was the one misunderstanding the situation. The warm air hit us the second I stepped inside. And the contrast? It was unbearable. Behind me, freezing cold, snow, silence. In front of me, heat, light, laughter, Christmas music still playing softly in the background. It didn't feel real. I kicked the door shut behind me and moved quickly toward the couch, lowering Noah down just enough to wrap him in the thick throw blanket draped over the armrest. "Stay here," I murmured, rubbing his arms, trying to get warmth back into him. His fingers clutched the fabric immediately. Still quiet? Still not complaining? That was what made it worse. His feet, I said louder now. Look at his feet, my mom sighed. Actually sighed, like I just pointed out something mildly inconvenient. He's fine, Elena. Kids are resilient. Resilient. That word echoed in my head like it didn't belong in the same room as what I had just seen. I crouched down, gently lifting one of Noah's feet into my hands. Ice cold, his skin pale in some places, flushed red in others. I swallowed hard. How long? I asked. No answer. I looked up. My dad shifted slightly in his chair, finally speaking. It wasn't that long. Not that long. How long? I repeated, sharper this time. My mom crossed her arms. I didn't time it, Elena. Maybe 10 minutes? 15 at most. 15. My stomach dropped, because I knew that wasn't true. I glanced toward the wall clock. 9:18 a.m. What time did he go outside? I asked. She hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. Right after breakfast, she said. And what time was breakfast? Another pause. 8:30. My grip tightened slightly around Noah's blanket, because that meant, even if she was downplaying it, even if she was cutting that time in half, he had been out there far longer than a few minutes. I looked at Noah. Hey, baby, I said softly. When did you go outside? He hesitated. His eyes flicked toward my mom, then back to me. After I spilled, he said quietly. What did Grandma say? He swallowed. You said I had to wait until you said I could come back. The room went still. I turned slowly, back to her. You forgot him out there, I said. It wasn't a question. Her expression changed, but not in the way you'd expect. Not guilt, not panic, annoyance. I did not forget him, she snapped. I was teaching him a lesson. A lesson. Behind me, I could feel Noah shifting slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. A lesson? I repeated. Yes, she said, her voice sharper now. He needs structure. He's too soft, Elena. You let him get away with everything. Too soft. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep control, because something was building now, fast. He's 6, I said. And that's exactly why this matters, she shot back. This is when you shape behavior, not when he's older and it's too late. Too late? I stared at her, really stared, trying to understand how she could stand there, next to a warm fire, surrounded by wrapping paper and laughter, and justify leaving a child outside in freezing weather. And then it hit me. Even this wasn't a mistake, not a lapse in judgment, not something she regretted. She believed she was right. My dad stood up slowly. All right, he said, stepping between us slightly. Let's not turn this into something bigger than it is. Something bigger? I almost laughed. Bigger than it is? I said, my voice low now, controlled. He was outside, barefoot, in the snow. And he's fine now, my mom said quickly. Fine, that word again. But he wasn't. And neither was this. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about what happened this morning. This was about something deeper. Something that had always been there, just under the surface. Control, dismissal, and a complete lack of accountability. I looked back at Noah, then back at them. And in that moment, something shifted, permanently. You locked him out, I said. And this time, no one interrupted me. And that's when everything changed. The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that presses in. Tight. Heavy. Even the Christmas music in the background suddenly felt too loud. And then someone, maybe my dad, reached over and turned it off. Silence. You locked him out, I repeated. This time slower, clearer. My mom didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't deny it. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, like she was confused why I was still talking about it. Yes, she said. I told you. He needed a consequence. There it was. No hesitation, no apology, just certainty. I felt something in my chest shift again, but this time it wasn't shock. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. Cold, precise, final. You locked a 6-year-old outside, I said, and each word measured. In the snow, without shoes. He was not going to freeze, Elena, she replied, her tone sharpening. Stop being dramatic. Dramatic. Behind me, I could hear the faint rustle of the blanket as Noah adjusted himself on the couch. Still quiet. Still listening. I glanced at him for just a second. And that was enough. Because I saw it. Not just the cold. Not just the fear. The confusion. The kind that settles into a child when something doesn't make sense. But they assume it must somehow be their fault. And just like that, any doubt I had left disappeared. This isn't discipline, I said, turning back to her. This is dangerous. She let out a short laugh. Dangerous. Like the word itself was ridiculous. You're overreacting, she said again. This is exactly what I mean. You coddle him. That's why he's so fragile. Fragile. I felt my jaw tighten. He's not fragile, I said. He's 6. And he'll grow up weak if you keep this up, she fired back immediately. The real world isn't going to care about his feelings. The real world. I took a slow step forward. Not aggressive, not rushed, just deliberate. No, I said quietly. But it also doesn't lock children outside in freezing weather. That landed. For a second, just a second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, but irritation, like I'd crossed some invisible line. My dad stepped in again. All right, enough, he said, holding his hands up slightly. Let's just calm down and… No, I cut in. And that surprised him. Because I don't interrupt him. I don't push like that. But I did now. Don't tell me to calm down, I said. My voice steady, but firm in a way it had never been before. He was outside, alone, and neither of you thought that was a problem. We handled it, my mom snapped. Handled it. I let out a slow breath, because now I understood something that changed everything. There was no version of this conversation where they would admit they were wrong. No version where they would suddenly understand. No version where this became safe again. And that meant one thing. I couldn't leave him here. Ever. Not for an hour. Not for a night. Not again. Behind me, I felt Noah's small hand reach out, grabbing the edge of my coat, holding on. And that was it. That was the moment everything locked into place. My mom was still talking, something about boundaries and respect and raising him properly. But I wasn't listening anymore, because I'd already made the decision. I stepped closer, close enough that she couldn't ignore me, close enough that the distance between us, the one that had always been there, finally disappeared. She stopped talking, looked at me, waiting. I met her eyes, then my dad's, and in that moment, I said 6 words. 6 words that cut through everything in that room. The fire, the presence, the years of tension, all of it, and everything stopped. The words didn't come out loud. They didn't need to. They landed exactly where they were supposed to. For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. It was like the entire room froze. But not from the cold outside. From that sentence. My mom blinked. Once, slowly, like she was trying to process whether she had heard me correctly. "Excuse me," she said, but I didn't repeat myself. I didn't need to explain it differently. So I said it again. Same words, same tone. "You will never see him again." This time, it hit. Her expression shifted. Not into guilt, not into regret, into offense. "That is not your decision to make," she said sharply. But here's the thing. It was. I adjusted the blanket around Noah's shoulders, pulling it tighter, making sure his feet were fully covered now. He was watching us. Quiet, careful. "Yes," I said calmly. "It is." My dad stepped forward, hands raised again like he could smooth this over. "Elena, don't do this," he said. "You're upset. Let's just talk about this later." "No," I said again. And this time there was no room left in my voice for negotiation. "Later is how things like this get ignored," I continued. Later is how this becomes not a big deal." I looked directly at my mom. "You locked him outside," I said, "in freezing weather, without shoes, and then you sat here in open presence while he knocked on the door." She scoffed. "He was fine." That word again. I shook my head. No, he wasn't. And the fact that you think he was is exactly why this is over. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. For the first time, my dad didn't interrupt, didn't soften it, didn't redirect. He just stood there, looking between us. And I could see it. He knew, he just didn't want to say it. "You're blowing this out of proportion," my mom said, but her voice had lost some of its edge now. "You can't just cut us out over one mistake." One mistake. I let out a quiet breath, because now I was done explaining. "Why, this wasn't a mistake," I said. "You said it yourself. You meant to do it." She didn't respond. "And if you think that's acceptable," I added, "then I can't trust you around him." That was the truth. Simple, clear, final. I bent down slightly, brushing Noah's hair back from his forehead. "We're going home," I said softly. He nodded immediately. No hesitation. And that told me everything I needed to know. I stood up, still holding him close, and walked toward the door. "Elena," my dad called after me. I paused, just for a second. "You're really going to do this?" he asked. I didn't turn around. "I already did," I said. And then I walked out. The cold hit again, but this time it didn't feel the same, because now he wasn't alone in it. Logical payoff. What actually happened over the next few days, and everything became clearer, piece by piece. Noah had gone outside just after spilling his drink, around 8:35 a.m. My mom told him to wait a few minutes, but she never went back for him. The door had been locked, and at some point, he stopped knocking loudly, because he thought he was supposed to wait. By the time I arrived, it had been over 40 minutes. 40 minutes. In the snow, barefoot. And inside, they heard him, at least once, but chose to ignore it, because in her words later, he needed to learn, emotional payoff. That part stayed with me, not the argument, not the words, the waiting. The idea of him standing there, not understanding why no one was opening the door, still believing he just needed to be patient. That was the part I couldn't shake. For days, he stayed closer to me than usual. Months, small things changed. He'd ask, "You're not going anywhere, right?" Even if I was just walking into the next room. At night, he wanted the door open, lights on, and every time, I answered the same way. "I'm right here." Consequence. Payoff. I didn't let it fade. I didn't let it become a story we moved past. I documented everything. Dates, times, what was said. I took him to his pediatrician the next day, explained what happened, made sure it was officially recorded, not for revenge, for protection. I also made changes, big ones. I rearranged my work schedule, even though it meant less money. Found a certified overnight childcare provider, someone trained, verified, safe. As for my parents, I blocked their numbers. At first, they tried reaching out through other family members. Messages came in, some supportive, some not. "You're overreacting. They're still your parents." It was just discipline. But none of that changed anything, because none of them were there. None of them saw him standing in the snow. Over time, the noise faded. People moved on. But I didn't go back. My dad sent one last message, weeks later. Short, simple. I should have said something. I didn't respond. Final resolution moment. A year later, Christmas morning looked different. No big house, no perfectly arranged decorations, no tension hiding under polite smiles. Just a small apartment. Warm, quiet, a tree in the corner with slightly uneven ornaments. Most of them plastic, unbreakable. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, tearing into wrapping paper with actual excitement this time. Laughing, not careful, not hesitant, free. When I watched him from the couch, a mug of coffee in my hands, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt steady. He looked up at me suddenly. "Mom? Yeah? We're staying here, right?" I smiled. "Always." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his gifts. No locked doors, no silence, no waiting. And this time, no one was left outside.